Hey guys, what's up? This is Stephanie Fleitas here with creatingwithin.com, your place to get in touch with your inner world. And today's topic is on fear. So I want to touch on 3 points regarding the topic of fear. I want to talk about where do fears come from, how can we discover our fears, and a couple ways to overcome them so that we're kind of free to move into the direction of the things we want. So where do fears come from? Because when we really think about it innately, we only have 2 fears that we're actually born with, that is intertwined in our DNA. That's a survival mechanism, and that is we are afraid of loud noises and afraid of falling. But those are the only 2 fears that we are innately born with. Everything else is learned, and everything else comes from the experiences and situations that we find ourselves in, and then we make our minds about something. We decide what that experience meant, and therefore fear is born. But really, when you break it down, where is fear coming from? It's really coming from our thinking patterns and the way that we think. And oftentimes it comes from self-criticism, from thinking critically about ourselves. When we're thinking that we're not enough, when we're worrying about if we disappointed because we're not living up to their expectations, when we're afraid of failing, when we're too hard on ourselves, when we don't feel like we're enough, when we're afraid that we're not loved. All these kinds of thought patterns is really what creates our fears, because anxiety, worry, indecisions are all code for fear. It's all masked in that one energy of fear, because we really only have 2 energies. It's either love or fear, and every emotion falls into one of these 2 categories of energy. So therefore, like, our fears are something that we learn, that we produce in ourselves. Because oftentimes when you find yourself that every time you're scared, it's really you're scared of the story, because most of our fears, we always live it out in our head before we physically experience it. You know, we are already predicting how it's going to be before we've even gotten there. And it's kind of crazy. And that's the same thing with worry and anxiety. That's why that quote says, you know, if you're living in worry, you're living in the past. You know, if you're in anxiety, you're living in the future. And it comes down to that. And it's because of our thought patterns. When we're constantly in anxiety, it's because we're constantly thinking about something, and what can this, and what if this happens, you know, and using past situations to reference them to what is possible, what can possibly happen in the future. So it all comes down to our thinking patterns. So that's where our fears really come from. So now let's talk about how we can discover fears. And one way to do this is to ask yourself, if you have a decision that you need to make in your life, like there's a decision you need to make about something you want to do. Now ask yourself, are there any reasons why you can't do something? A lot of times when we're afraid, we have all these stories like I don't have enough money to do it. I don't know if I can do it. I'm afraid of failing. So there's usually all these stories. For example, when I wanted to travel the world, you know, before I actually did it, I had been wanting to do it 2 years before, but I psyched myself out because I got in my head, and you know, what if I don't have enough money to do it, and you know, what if I do this and nothing comes of it, and what if I run out of money while I'm traveling the world, and you know, can I be safe out there? So it's all these thoughts that you have in your mind, and if you feed into them, they actually prevent you from doing that thing that you want to do. So oftentimes we have to discover our fears by looking at the things that we want to do and finding the reasons. Find reasons why you feel you can't do something. A way you can do this is take a piece of paper and list out the things you want to do, and then make a column of why you can't do it and why you can do it. And when you see that you have more reasons as to why you can't do it, that right there is telling you that that is a fear. It is coming from fear. And fear, all that it really means is that it's a place within us that is dark, that needs light. Because if you can look back at any time in your life that you were scared of something, I can almost guarantee you that what you were afraid of was always worse in your mind than it ever was in actual reality. So fear is all mental. It's all an illusion, and it keeps us prisoner. It really does. It can really take a hold of you. But what's the worst that can happen? Because really, most of the times that I've done the things I feared, it was always worse in my mind. So we live in constant state of worry and anxiety. for anticipating for something that hasn't even occurred yet, but then we're not willing to take the step to do it because we're too afraid of what could be. Therefore, we never do it. It's kind of crazy when we think about it. Most of us go through life just living in our heads without ever really doing the things we want to do. So here are a few ways to overcome our fears. And Tony Robbins said one of these, it's a great tool to use. He said once that you have to find something that you're more afraid of than your fear. This is one way to overcome our fears. And that's so true, because when I really sat down to think about wanting to travel the world, I became more afraid of regret and of not living up to the image of the woman that I know myself to be, the higher version of who I am, that is somebody who walks her talk, and I always have gone after the things that I want and believe in despite fear. So when I sat and thought and looked at my life, what would it be like, 50 years from now? And this is another way to overcome fear, is by sitting back and reflecting 50 years from our life. Are we going to look back at this moment and this thing that we want to do and regret not doing it? And when I looked back at my life and I said, at the end of my life, I'm going to regret not doing this. And I'm more afraid of not doing it than actually doing it, because I'm going to live with the regret. And the regret scared me more than the actual fears of what ifs, of all the what ifs that could happen if I did take the plunge. So at that moment, it was more important for me to do it, despite the fact that I was scared, because I was most scared of not doing it. So those are two ways to overcome it. Find something that you're more afraid of than your fear. And then 2, look back at this thing and say, in 20 years and 50 years, is this something that I'm going to regret? At the end of my life, what is my story? Because our life is just compiled of moments and the things that we do. Everything else, doesn't matter. And lastly, find out the why behind the wanting to do something. A lot of times we say we want this, we want that, but we're so not in touch with ourselves on an emotional level that we don't really know why we want the things that we want. And oftentimes, which is why we don't get the things that we want. Or if we do get it, we then realize that it's not really what we wanted, because underneath everything that we want, there's a reason why we want it. We believe that having this thing or having this experience is going to provide us some type of feeling. We're going to feel some type of way. We're going to receive something. It's going to fill some type of need within us on an emotional level, more than just the physical aspect of having that thing or doing that thing. That makes sense. So find the why behind it. When I dug deep as to why I wanted to travel the world, I knew that I wanted to travel the world not just for the sake of travel itself. I didn't just want to travel to see pretty places or to have the experience of traveling. Yeah, that was nice. But my reason for traveling was because I wanted to feel the freedom of the full essence of who I am, because I've always been this very free person. And I wanted to experience that freedom of living moment to moment. And I also wanted to conquer my fear. I wanted to feel my strength and know that I could do something despite my fear, and know that I'm going to grow from all the experiences, the challenges that are going to come up for me through this journey. So for me, it was more than just seeing places. It was, for me, it was about growth. It was about connection, and it was about loving myself and doing something that felt very loving to me. And when you know why you want something, you make it a must. You have clarity of mind, and the universe opens the doors and everything gets out of the way. But when we don't know what we want, our signal is very muddled. So we bring a little bit of this and we bring a little bit of that. And so we're not going on a clear path. We're having a lot of detours and obstacles to get there. And a lot of times we think we want something, but it's a should. And another thing, quick, before we wrap this up, is to know that when you want something, you also have to want the struggle that comes with it. Because many times we want something, we want change, but at the same time we want everything to remain the same. And the truth is that when you want something, you also have to want, if you want the reward of something, you have to want the struggle that comes with it, because everything has a challenge. If you want to work out, if you want to have a nice body, you got to want the waking up early, the sweating, the pain, the discipline that goes into it. Otherwise, you don't really want it. So realize that when you want something, also make sure that you want the struggle that comes with it in order to get it. I will leave you with this for now on this topic, and I hope that it was helpful and that you can utilize it in your life to further you in your inner world and growth. I will talk to you soon. Until next time, keep communicating, connecting, and creating. Ciao.